unparalleled skill, or just dominate imaginary people with facts and logic while you have a shower? If so, you would not be alone in this wish. The father of Western philosophy, Socrates, wanted to do the same thing, though maybe not the bit about the shower. Socrates would look across ancient Athens, and everywhere he saw people holding beliefs they could not possibly justify. He could not let things go on like this. Athens had to be taught critical thinking, and Socrates was going to do it, even if it killed him. Here, we are going to look at Socrates' famous questioning technique, with a few bonus additions from me, and see why it worked so well. By the end of this video, perhaps you too will be able to transform history fair.
There is a country in Africa
Socrates would disarm an argument without anyone even noticing, how to ensure that your worldview is not full of holes, and how we can apply critical thinking in our everyday lives. Let's get started. 1. Pre-arguing. I find that critical discussions can be a little bit like heavy exercise. It is helpful to mentally stretch beforehand to put yourself in the right mindset, and to see if this argument is worth your time or your opponent's. And this is where pre-arguing comes in. It is something you see Socrates do quite a lot in Plato's dialogues, and it often comes in the form of checking underlying definitions and assumptions. Say you and I are having a debate about God's existence. However, you happen to be a deist. That is, someone who does not believe that God controls the universe, but just kicked it off. I may not know this and assume that you are a theist, someone who believes that God is still actively involved in the universe. As a result, if I were to challenge your worldview on the basis of some classic theological questions, like the problem of evil, then that would not be strictly relevant. Here, we have ended up working with two different definitions of God. You have a definition of God where he is uninvolved with the universe as it currently exists, whereas I have a definition where he is. The problem here is that while we disagree over definitions, no productive discussion can take place. If I say God doesn't exist and you say God does exist, then we don't actually contradict one another. This happens in political arguments all the time. People have vastly different definitions of words like socialist or capitalist or left-wing or right-wing, and then get into discussions that from the very outset, even if both parties are arguing in good faith, cannot be productive. This is a practical example of why it is so important to clarify key terms and assumptions before you enter a debate. That is, if you want it to be a productive discussion aimed at truth. To return to our argument about the definition of God, if I had stopped to ask what your definition of God is, I might discover that we disagree a lot less than I initially thought. It would also tell me not to invoke arguments that are leveled specifically at a theist position. At the very least, this can save you and your interlocutor some time. But at its most extreme, it can prevent shouting matches over a disagreement based on an illusion. One of the first questions Socrates tends to ask people in Plato's dialogues is for their definitions of some key terms. Be it justice or beauty or love, Socrates wants to know how they are using the word. If they have a disagreement, Socrates often changes the discussion to be about which definition they should use, so that they can agree on this before they move forward. Without doing this, all of the dialogues would just be a waste of everyone's precious time. And I want to make a short addition to Socrates' questions here. I think a good question to ask both ourselves and our interlocutors at the beginning of a discussion is, under what circumstances would you or I be wrong? This works wonderfully for a couple of reasons. The first is that it establishes whether someone is interested in having a real good faith discussion, or whether they are simply interested in defending their position to the death. If someone really cannot imagine that they would change their mind under any circumstances, then chances are the debate just is not worth having. And secondly, it gives a real insight into the factors that motivate someone's belief. If I was arguing in favor of legalizing euthanasia, I still might concede that I would change my mind if most people were pressured into the decision. That would give you an insight into the underlying ideas that maintain my position. For instance, I'm likely to think that laws should be justified on their consequences, rather than believing they should mimic a preordained set of moral rules. And I know it can get tedious, but it is genuinely worth going through this pre-argumentation stage before a debate enters full swing. The two key questions to ask here are, what definitions are we using for the key terms in our discussion? And under what circumstances would we change our minds? But obviously, we can't stop there. Now we have to actually have the argument. And next, we will look at my favourite type of Socratic question. One that can easily find potential flaws in a position without making someone retreat into a defensive shell. If you want to help me make more videos like this, then consider subscribing to either my email list or my Patreon. The links are in the description.
Hi, Marie.
2.
Hi, Marie.
The ignoramus and clarification. One of the most disarming things you can say in an argument is, I'm not sure I completely understand your position. And the reason for this is twofold. First, it concedes an imaginary point to your opponent and lets them know you are not just in this to batter or humiliate them, you are genuinely interested in what they think. And secondly, it opens up the possibility of asking clarificatory questions. And this is often key to a productive discussion. Anecdotally, people are much more likely to change or shift their position when they spot a flaw in their argument themselves, rather than having them pointed out by some bastard like me. So often, the best way to highlight the flaws in someone's position is to ask them to clarify what they mean and let the holes in their argument be exposed that way. In Plato's Republic, the character of Socrates debates with Thrasymachus, who argues that justice is whatever the stronger person desires. So Socrates asks him exactly what he means by this. And Thrasymachus replies by saying that justice is whatever advantages the stronger person. But then he has immediately revealed his mistake, because what the stronger person desires and what the stronger person benefits from are two separate things. Someone very powerful might be mistaken about what benefits them. And in such a situation, Thrasymachus is caught in a contradiction. And it is only through asking him exactly what he means that Socrates was able to uncover this contradiction in his worldview. To give a more up-to-date example, imagine that you and I are having a discussion, and I say we should not listen to the opinions of immoral people.
Hi, Meow.
You might challenge this position by asking me, what do you mean by immoral that makes someone's opinions no longer worth listening to? I might reply that immoral people are more likely to make mistakes due to their poor character. But you can then ask me, what do you mean by mistakes? I might reply by saying that they will mistake good actions for bad ones and bad for good. But at this point, you can point out that my argument only actually covers moral debates, and it leaves it open that immoral people might be perfectly worth listening to on other topics. Without having to outright challenge my position, you've transformed it from a grand claim into a much more circumspect one, which you could now attack in other ways, should you choose to do so. The key question here is, what do you mean by that? It sounds so simple, but it is devastatingly effective. And it is important to approach this with genuine curiosity. It might expose your interlocutor as having an outright contradiction in their views, but it could just as easily reveal its indisputable coherence. Either way, you will understand your opponent's position much better, and this is essential for a productive discussion. And it is worth asking this question to ourselves as well. It can help us understand our own positions. When was the last time you sat back and examined your worldview to see where there are unclarified terms, or where you couldn't explain it simply? This can be an excellent exercise to check that we truly know what we think. and that we are not accidentally parroting an opinion we have picked up from somewhere else. But there is a key type of question we have yet to examine, and without it, any accounts of Socratic questioning would be woefully incomplete. 3. Causes and reasons. This is the quintessential philosophical question. Why do you think that? But it's worth noting that this in turn can split into two further questions, each with their own purposes. The first is, what has caused you to think that? And the second is, what are your reasons for thinking that? I know they look similar, but there is a crucial difference. Say I'm again arguing in favour of euthanasia's legality, and you want to know the cause of my belief. I might answer by saying that I've heard the testimony of many suffering people who say in earnest that they would like to end their own lives. And the emotions I've felt in response have, to a certain extent, motivated my position. This is a causal story. One thing happened and my belief was affected by it. But importantly, the causal process did not run through my reason or my deliberation. And this might be different to my reasons for supporting the legalization of euthanasia. It could be that the primary reason for my position is that I think everyone has the right to do what they wish with their own body, provided it is not directly harming other people, and that I think euthanasia falls into this category of action. This is not just a cause, it is a reasoned argument. It's worth noting that in some accounts, all reasons are also causes, whereas in others they are totally separate categories, but I don't want to get into this debate here. For our purposes, the distinction is important because whereas a reason for believing can be refuted by logic, a cause of a belief might be emotional or pragmatic. To quote a common phrase online, you can't logic someone out of a position that they haven't logicked themselves into. So these two questions are good at separating the types of things that are worth challenging with reason and those logic probably won't make much headway on. If someone believes something because it was their father's dying words, you're very unlikely to convince them otherwise. Then, honing in on the reasons someone believes something can give us an idea of where the flaws in their argument might lie. To return to the example of euthanasia, you might challenge the idea that euthanasia does not directly harm others, or that we have unrestricted rights to our own body. If you are religious, you might say that our bodies are partly the domain of God, or you might say we owe it to our community to continue living. The point is, now you have a good idea of why I believe what I believe, and can challenge my reasoning. I know that this to a certain extent sounds really obvious, but you don't have to go far to see people completely misunderstanding the reasons for someone else's belief. Or even worse, just assuming their reasons, possibly strawmanning them in the process. Think of the times you hear people say, well, of course you believe that. You just want to see people suffer. Or, all Christians are the same. You're just scared of death. Instead of asking for the reasons or causes behind someone's belief, we just make up our own and argue with them instead. It is quite tempting. After all, it's much easier. And these questions also encourage us to be more honest about why we hold our own views. We can learn to identify when we have a good set of reasons for a belief and when extra-rational factors have crept in. There is nothing necessarily wrong with holding a belief that is not hewn straight from the granite rock of logic. But it's worth recognizing this, just so we're aware of what material is supporting our viewpoints. But this line of inquiry links very well with another type of Socratic question, one that places the emphasis on empathizing with the views of other people, in order to open our minds to all the possibilities we have not yet considered. 4. The alternatives. There is a really famous clip in the UK of an Italian TV chef shouting, "If my grandmother had wheels, she would have been a bike." He meant it to mock someone who had just compared what he was cooking to a British-style carbonara. But to actually think this is kind of a fun thought experiment. If you had wheels in place of all of your limbs, how would that affect the way you see the world? You would probably think more in continuous distances than in individual steps. You would definitely have a greater awareness of which buildings in your area had ramp access. The whole orientation of your life would be subtly changed in innumerable ways. And I think this is a great thing to ask ourselves in discussions. If I had different experiences, how would I see this question differently? If I had grown up in a collapsing nation, I might understandably value security a little bit more than freedom. A lot of people say that when they have children or go through a near-death experience, their priorities shift in a way that they could not possibly have predicted. Considering this can have a brilliant mind-opening effect on our worldview, because downstream of these perspective changes are all the alternative propositions that we could inadvertently be ignoring. For instance, by considering how we might view the world differently if we were raised in a highly competitive and borderline toxic environment, we might understand why some people are not so naively trusting as ourselves. On this channel, I cover a lot of philosophers with pretty cynical views, and this is partly because by nature I am such a crude optimist, and so looking at these thinkers helps to counterbalance my own biases. This is also another great way of encouraging people to engage in critical thinking without directly confronting them. Imagine you are having a discussion with someone who is hell-bent on defending the death penalty, and you don't necessarily want to disagree with them head-on, but you want to encourage them to the idea there might be other perspectives. Like we said before, a good start is to ask them under what circumstances they would change their mind. These might be both emotional and non-rational circumstances, like imagining someone that they knew had been falsely sentenced to hang, but also considering rational alternatives, like what the level of false convictions would have to be in order for them to shift their position. This obviously links a lot with what I said in the first section about asking under which conditions you would abandon your position. But it is broadened in scope to asking what perspectives or alternatives you are just not yet considering. You might still end up believing the same things, and so might your discussion partner, but you will have a fuller consideration of the alternatives on offer. And if one seems more plausible, you will then have the opportunity to switch your position. A lot of the time, we don't know what we don't know. And this type of question is a good way of simulating what the discussion would look like through different eyes. We also might connect this with our previous question about the reasons and causes people hold certain beliefs. Even if your opponent is obviously mistaken, what about their lives and experiences have brought them to this point? You can even ask them this directly, provided you do so tactfully. This does not mean that you will end up agreeing with your opponent, but it helps prevent the argument from descending into chaos, and it encourages both speakers to understand where the other is coming from. But no questioning model is complete without our next point, where we will have to crack open our logic textbooks and thumb its well-worn pages. 5. Implications and consequences. One of the most famous types of philosophical argument is the reductio ad absurdum. This is essentially where you examine the implications of your opponent's position to show either that it is outright contradictory or that it just has absurd consequences. It involves drawing out what would follow from a given position actually being true. You see examples of this a lot in debates around moral relativism. A very crude form of this position states that an action is good if I believe it is good is true. In this scenario, if I say that murder is wrong and someone else says that murder is right, both our positions would be rendered true. Hence, there is a contradiction. Of course, this is a straw man version of moral relativism. They tend to respond by saying that we've misunderstood their position. They might instead say that the meaning of truth in the moral sphere is just relative to individual people. So I have my moral truths and you have yours, but they don't contradict. This is normally countered with another reductio argument, stating that if that were the case, we could never resolve moral disagreements, since every one of our moral beliefs would be true by definition. The moral relativists might then alter their position, and so on and so forth. I don't want to get sucked into a debate about moral relativism. I just want to look at the structures of the arguments involved. The responses to the moral relativist here are all of the form, well, if you take that position, then this also must follow. But that's absurd, so the original position must be false. To use a technical term, they are modus tollens arguments. A modus ponens argument is of the form, if A then B, A, therefore B. Whereas a modus tollens argument is of the form, if A then B, not B, therefore not A. So in the above example, the argument was as follows. If moral relativism were true, then we would not be able to solve moral disputes. We can solve moral disputes, therefore moral relativism cannot be true. And this is not just helpful for examining other people's positions, it is fantastic for putting our own views to the test. Some of the greatest critical thinkers in history have used this approach. For instance, much of St. Thomas Aquinas' great work, Summa Theologica, is about working out the consequences of different theological and philosophical views to see if they are acceptable. Likewise, a huge proportion of Plato's dialogues consist of Socrates testing out the consequences of his opponent's position and working out where they might end up contradicting themselves or asserting something that is philosophically tenuous. He doesn't always do this successfully. There's an infamous passage in the Meno that comes to mind, but it is still a cornerstone of his approach. The key questions to ask here are, if I believed this, what else would follow? Or conversely, if I did not believe this, what would follow from that? Then, after we've seen the implications of a position, we can ask ourselves if it is worth accepting the worldview given the consequences. This is a type of question it's great to explore after having gone through all the stages we've already covered. This is because it involves having a clear conception of the reasons behind someone's belief and a full clarification of the contents of that belief. But there is one final thing worth asking in any discussion or self-interrogation, and it's intended to ensure that we have not missed a spot in our logical cleaning. 6. Questioning questions. This is where we come full circle and ask ourselves if we have questions to our satisfaction. Do we truly understand our opponent's position, or do we still need some clarity? Have we really got to grips with why we believe something, or have we got our reasons and our causes confused? Are there any questions we want to ask that don't fall into any of these camps? And if so, what are they? This is slightly different to previous sections, as it does not provide a series of questions that we can list off, or a neat type of inquiry that we can make. It instead outlines a sort of general attitude to discussion or debate. It is essentially a moment where we sit back and consult our intuitions. If we have been involved in a lot of discussions or self-interrogations in the past, we might ask what we questioned then that we have not questioned now, or double-check that we have not made mistakes that were previously commonplace. Above all, it involves a certain level of epistemic humility, of recognizing that despite our best efforts, we might have missed something. There is no step-by-step guide I can give you to asking this question, and arguably there shouldn't be. Learning how to think critically is like any skill. It is a slow and steady process refined over many years of practice. I have written and learnt an awful lot about formal logic, and I've had a metric ton of arguments, but there is still so much I have yet to learn. The primary way to get better from here is just practice. If we use these questions in our everyday lives, interrogating the propositions we find out in the world and our prior beliefs, Then we will increase our skills little by little until we instinctively know which questions to ask, where the weak points in an argument are likely to be, and what are the biases and flaws in our own reasoning. But of course, none of this will matter if our logic is full of fallacies. So check out this video to learn the 3 types of fallacy and how to avoid them. And stick around for more on thinking to improve your life.
Here's how you get ahead of 99% of people in 6 to 12 months. Become brutally aware of 2 things. The first is what you don't want.
Dealing with difficult negotiators. When faced with aggressive or manipulative tactics, maintain your composure and stand firm on your key priorities. Use techniques like reframing. Turn their negative statements into constructive discussions. Silence. Don't rush to fill awkward pauses. They often prompt the other party to speak first. Walking away. If the negotiation becomes unproductive or hostile, be willing to end the conversation. A strong BATNA gives you the confidence to do so without fear. Exercises to sharpen your negotiation skills. Negotiation is a skill, and like any skill, it improves with practice. Try these exercises to hone your abilities. 1. Role-playing. Practice negotiating with a friend or colleague, taking turns playing the other party. Focus on asking questions, handling objections, and framing your proposals. 2. Reverse negotiation. Put yourself in the other party's shoes and argue their position. This helps you anticipate their perspective and refine your strategy. 3. Debrief and reflect. After every negotiation, reflect on what went well and what could have been improved. Use these insights to grow. Negotiation isn't just about winning. It's about finding solutions that work for everyone involved. By approaching it as a collaborative process, you can build stronger relationships, create lasting agreements, and earn respect as a thoughtful and effective communicator. In the next part, we'll explore how to handle objections and resistance more deeply. You'll learn how to reframe doubts, address fears, and turn no into yes without sacrificing your integrity or the trust you've built. You're on the path to becoming a master negotiator. Keep going. Chapter 5: Turning Resistance into Agreement. Introduction. The hidden opportunity in no. No can feel like a brick wall, an impassable obstacle that signals failure in persuasion. But what if you began to see resistance not as a roadblock, but as a stepping stone? What if every objection or hesitation wasn't a rejection, but an invitation to dig deeper, build trust, and create a more compelling argument? Resistance, when handled skillfully, is a natural and necessary part of persuasion. This chapter is dedicated to mastering the art of navigating resistance. You'll learn how to uncover the fears and concerns behind objections, respond with empathy and authority, and transform moments of doubt into opportunities for connection and agreement. Resistance isn't the end of the conversation. It's often where the real persuasion begins. Understanding the root of resistance. Resistance is rarely about the surface level objection you hear. More often than not, it stems from deeper fears, doubts, or unmet needs. To address resistance effectively, you must first understand what's driving it. The 3 core causes of resistance. Fear of loss. People fear losing money, time, or credibility. For instance, a potential client might hesitate to commit to your service because they're afraid it won't deliver the promised results, wasting their budget. 2. Uncertainty. When people don't have enough information or confidence in their decision, they default to no. This is often a self-protective mechanism to avoid making a mistake. 3. Mismatched values. Sometimes resistance arises because your proposal doesn't align with the other person's values or priorities. For example, someone might reject a higher-paying job offer because it doesn't offer the flexibility they value. Recognizing these underlying causes allows you to tailor your responses to address the real issues rather than just the symptoms. Reframing objections as opportunities. When faced with resistance, your first instinct might be to push harder, explain more, or convince the other person why they're wrong. But this approach often backfires, making them dig in their heels even further. Instead, see objections as opportunities to build trust and demonstrate understanding. Step 1. Acknowledge and validate their concerns.
Hi, Shamira.
The quickest
God.
way to
Hi,
diffuse
Shamira.
resistance is to
I'm so
show
sorry.
that
I was
you've
supposed to
heard
text
and
you.
respect their concerns. For instance, if a client says, "I'm not sure this is the right fit for me," resist the urge to jump in with counter-arguments.
And thank you for
Instead,
coming.
respond with empathy.
So let me tell you now, thank you for
I
coming.
completely
You
understand.
Are cute.
Making a decision like
Thank you
this
for
can
coming
feel
to my
overwhelming,
thingy last
and
time.
it's important to
You are
feel
amazing.
confident before moving forward.
Should I call you next time?
By validating their feelings, you lower their defenses and open the door for a productive conversation. Step 2. Ask clarifying questions. Instead of guessing what's behind their resistance, ask open-ended questions to uncover the root cause. For example, can you tell me more about what's holding you back?
Oh my God, I needed
What would make you feel more confident about this decision? These questions not only provide valuable insights, but also show that you care about their perspective. Step 3. Reframe the objection. Once you understand their concerns, reframe the objection in a way that highlights the benefits of your proposal. For instance, objection: "This feels too expensive." Response: "I hear you. Budget is always an important consideration. Many of my clients felt the same way initially, but they found that the long-term savings and results far outweighed the upfront cost. Would it help if I broke down how this investment pays off over time?" By shifting the focus from cost to value, you address their fear while reinforcing the benefits of your offer. The art of active listening. True persuasion begins with listening. When people feel heard, they're more likely to lower their defenses and open themselves to your ideas. Active listening
Bye,
isn't just
sweetie.
about hearing
Bye.
words. It's about understanding the emotions, motivations, and needs behind them. The 4 levels of listening. 1. Hearing, simply catching the
Don't do
words
that.
being said. 2. Understanding, comprehending the meaning behind the words. 3. Empathizing, connecting with the emotions driving their words. 4. Responding, reflecting back what you've heard in a way that shows you truly understand. For example, if someone says, "I just don't think this is the right time," an empathetic response might be, "It sounds like timing is a big concern for you right now. Can you share more about what's making this feel difficult to commit to at the moment?" This approach not only validates their feelings, but also invites them to share more, giving you the opportunity to address their concerns more effectively. Handling common types of resistance. While every objection is unique, there are common patterns of resistance
Lucy.
that you're likely to encounter. Here's how to handle them. I don't have time. Time objections often mask deeper concerns about priorities or perceived value. Respond by emphasizing efficiency and outcomes. I completely understand. Time is one of our most valuable resources. That's why I've designed this to fit seamlessly into your schedule and deliver results quickly. Would it help if I walked you through how we can make this as time efficient as possible? It's too expensive. Cost objections are usually about perceived value rather than the actual price. Highlight the return on investment. I get it. Budgeting is always a concern. What's important to keep in mind is the long-term benefits you'll gain. For example, this product or service could save you X hours or increase your revenue by Y%. Let's explore how this aligns with your goals. I need to think about it. This often indicates uncertainty or fear of making the wrong decision. Respond by offering to clarify or provide additional information. Of course, it's important to take the time you need. What specific questions or concerns can I address to help you feel more confident about moving forward? Exercises to strengthen your objection. Handling skills. To become a master at overcoming resistance, practice is essential. Try these exercises to refine your skills. 1. Role play common objections. With a friend or colleague, practice responding to objections like cost, timing, or uncertainty. Focus on listening and reframing. 2. Mirror and reflect. Practice active listening by repeating back what the other person says in your own words. This builds rapport and ensures you understand their perspective. 3. Reframe challenges. Write down common objections you encounter and brainstorm ways to reframe them positively. Handling resistance isn't about forcing your way through objections. It's about meeting people where they are, understanding their concerns, and guiding them toward a solution that feels right for both sides. When you approach objections with empathy, curiosity, and confidence, you don't just overcome resistance,
Hi, Jack.
you build trust and strengthen relationships. In the next part, we'll dive into advanced persuasion techniques that leverage the principles of influence and authority. You'll discover how to use scarcity, social proof, and reciprocity and to make your proposals even more compelling. Stay tuned. You're transforming into a true persuasion
Hi,
master.
Divine.
Chapter 6: Advanced Persuasion Techniques. Persuasion at its highest level is seamless. It feels natural, even effortless, as though the decision to agree or comply was entirely the other person's idea. What separates the good persuaders from the masters isn't just their ability to craft arguments or handle objections. It's their understanding of the subtle, invisible forces that influence human behavior. Advanced persuasion techniques tap into the psychology of influence, leveraging principles that are hardwired into the way we think and make decisions. These methods don't manipulate or deceive. Instead, they align your message with the natural tendencies of the human mind, creating a pathway of least resistance to agreement. This chapter will take you beyond the basics, equipping you with tools that are both powerful and ethical. From scarcity to authority, reciprocity to social proof, you'll learn how to apply these principles in ways that build trust, foster connection, and inspire action. The power of reciprocity. Giving to receive human beings are wired to respond to kindness with kindness. This is the principle of reciprocity. When someone does something for us, we feel a natural obligation to return the favor. It's one of the oldest and most universal rules of social behavior, and when used thoughtfully, it can be a powerful tool for persuasion. How reciprocity works in practice. Imagine you walk into a meeting with a potential client. Before the conversation even begins, you offer them a small but thoughtful gesture, a personalized report, a cup of coffee, or even a sincere compliment about their recent work. This act, while seemingly simple, activates a sense of indebtedness in their mind. They're now more likely to listen to you, consider your offer, and even agree to your proposal. The key to effective reciprocity is authenticity. The gesture must feel genuine, not calculated. If people sense that you're giving solely to get something in return, the effect is lost. Focus on providing real value, whether it's useful information, an act of service, or even just your undivided attention. Harnessing scarcity, creating a sense of urgency. We crave what we can't have. The principle of scarcity taps into our fear of missing out, driving us to act quickly to secure something before it's gone. This is why limited time offers, exclusive deals, and rare opportunities are so effective. They make us feel that the decision must be made now or the chance will be lost forever. Applying scarcity ethically. To use scarcity in a way that builds trust rather than pressure. Focus on framing it as an opportunity rather than a threat. For example, instead of saying, "If you don't act now, you'll lose this deal," try, "We have a few spots left this month, and I'd love to secure one for you if this feels like the right fit." Scarcity doesn't just apply to products or services, it can also apply to your time and attention. By positioning yourself as someone whose expertise or availability is in demand, you increase your perceived value. For instance, "I'm currently working with a limited number of clients to ensure I can provide the highest level of support. If this sounds like something you're interested in, I'd love to discuss it further." The authority principle. Why expertise matters. We're more likely to trust and follow people who we perceive as experts. This is the authority principle, and it's rooted in our tendency to defer to those who seem knowledgeable, credible, and experienced. However, authority isn't just about having credentials. It's about how you communicate your expertise in a way that resonates with others. Building and demonstrating authority. To establish authority, you need to show, not tell. Instead of saying, "I'm an expert in this field," share stories, results,
Luna.
or testimonials that highlight your experience. For example, "Over the past 5 years, I've worked with over 50 businesses to improve their marketing strategies, resulting in an average revenue increase of 30%. Your authority is also reflected in the way you carry yourself. Confidence, clarity, and composure all signal that you're someone worth listening to. And don't forget to back up your claims with evidence, whether it's data, case studies, or endorsements from respected figures in your industry. Social proof. The power of collective influence. Humans are social creatures, and we often look to others to guide our decisions. This is the principle of social proof. When we see that others are doing something, we're more likely to do it ourselves. Social proof creates a sense of safety and validation, reassuring people that they're making the right choice. Using social proof. Effectively, social proof can take many forms, including testimonials, reviews, case studies, and endorsements. The key is to make it relatable. For example, if you're persuading a small business owner, highlight stories of other small businesses you've helped. If you're working with a specific demographic, showcase examples from people in that same group. Numbers can also amplify social proof. Phrases like, "Join the thousands of customers who have benefited from our services," or 95% of our clients see results within the first month, create a compelling narrative of trust and success, combining principles for maximum impact. The true power of these persuasion techniques lies in their ability to work together. For example, you might use authority to establish credibility, scarcity to create urgency, and social proof to provide reassurance, all within the same conversation. Imagine you're presenting a new product to a potential client. You could say, "This product has been developed based on years of research, authority, and is already being used by leading companies in your industry." Social proof. We only have a limited supply available this quarter, so now is a great time to secure your order. Scarcity. By layering these principles, you create a persuasive message that appeals to multiple psychological triggers, increasing the likelihood of agreement. Exercises to practice advanced techniques. 1. Reciprocity in action. Identify a way to provide value to someone before making a request. This could be as simple as sharing a helpful resource or offering a genuine compliment. 2. Crafting scarcity statements. Write down how you might frame scarcity for a product, service, or opportunity you're offering. Focus on creating urgency without being pushy. Building your authority. List 3 ways you can demonstrate your expertise in your field, such as sharing case studies, publishing content, or highlighting achievements. 4. Collecting social proof. Reach out to past clients or colleagues for testimonials or reviews that showcase your impact. Practice weaving these into your conversations. Mastering advanced persuasion techniques isn't about tricks or manipulation. It's about aligning your message with the psychological principles that naturally guide human behavior. When used ethically and authentically, these techniques not only increase your ability to persuade, but also deepen trust and connection with those you interact with. In the next chapter, we'll explore how to tailor your persuasion approach to different personality types and situations, ensuring that your message resonates no matter who you're speaking to. Get ready to elevate your influence to the next level. Chapter 7. Tailoring your approach to different personalities. The true power of persuasion isn't just knowing what to say. It's knowing how to say it to the right person in the right way. People are unique. They come with different values, motivations, fears, and communication styles. Understanding this and adapting your persuasion strategies to fit each individual personality is what separates a good persuader from a great one. Have you ever noticed how some people respond well to a direct, logical approach, while others are more motivated by emotional appeals? Some people want details, while others prefer to hear a big picture vision. Some are driven by social validation, while others need authority and evidence. Your ability to identify these differences and adjust accordingly can make the difference between a yes and a no. This chapter will introduce you to different personality types and how to tailor your persuasion techniques
Hi,
to
Claudia.
connect with each one. You'll learn how to read people's cues, adapt your approach on the fly, and build rapport quickly with anyone, no matter their communication style. The analytical personality, the power of logic and facts. Analytical personalities are often logical, data-driven, and meticulous. They thrive on facts, evidence, and clear reasoning. When persuading someone with an analytical mindset, it's crucial to demonstrate that your ideas are grounded in solid logic and can be backed up with concrete evidence. How to communicate with an analytical person. 1. Be detail-oriented. Analytical individuals appreciate thorough explanations, avoid vague promises, and instead provide specific data, research, and statistics that support your argument. They want to know how things work, what results can be expected, and what the potential risks are. 2. Respect. Their need for time. Analytical personalities often need time to process
Hi,
information.
Snotty Pants.
They won't make decisions based on gut feelings or emotional appeal. So don't rush them. Be patient and give them the space to ask questions, digest the information, and come to their own conclusions. 3. Use logic to frame your proposal. Instead of trying to win them over with emotional appeals or quick sales tactics, focus on how your offer solves their problems or improves their situation in a rational way. Use frameworks, facts, and statistics to make your case. For example, we've seen that companies who implement this strategy experience a 20% increase in efficiency over the first 6 months. Let me show you the data that supports this. The key is to be prepared, precise, and evidence-based. 7.2. The driver personality. The power of efficiency and results. The driver personality is goal-oriented, decisive, and focused on achieving results. They want to know how your proposal will help them achieve their objectives, quickly and efficiently. They value time and don't want to be bogged down with unnecessary details or fluff. How to communicate with a driver 1. Be direct and to the point. Drivers don't have time for small talk or excessive details. When presenting an idea, get straight to the point. Emphasize how your solution aligns with their goals and provides the results they're looking for. 2. Highlight results and efficiency. Drivers are motivated by outcomes, so focus on how your solution delivers results.
Hi, oi,
Present
cha- oi,
clear,
chawi, oi,
measurable
chawai.
benefits and show how your proposal will save them time, effort, or resources. For example, this solution will cut your processing time by 30% and increase your team's productivity, freeing up time for more important tasks. 3. Be confident. Drivers respect confidence and decisiveness. They want to know that you're in control and that you can deliver on what you're promising. Avoid hesitation or over-explaining. Just present the facts with authority. With drivers, it's all about speed, efficiency, and clear results. The amiable personality, the power of relationships and reassurance. Amiable personalities are people-oriented, warm, and nurturing. They value relationships, harmony, and trust. When persuading someone with an amiable personality, it's important to establish a strong rapport and create a sense of security. They want to know that your proposal won't just work, it will benefit them and the people around them. How to communicate with an amiable person. 1. Build a personal connection. Amiable personalities respond well to genuine human interactions. Take the time to connect on a personal level before diving into business. Ask about their interests or well-being, and show that you care about them as a person, not just as a means to an end. 2. Use positive, supportive language. Focus on the positive aspects of your proposal and how it will improve their situation, particularly in ways that benefit others. For example, if you're proposing a new program to an amiable client, frame it in terms of how it will help their team or improve their community. 3. Reassure them. Amiable personalities can be risk-averse, so they may need extra reassurance that your proposal won't disrupt their environment or relationships. Provide guarantees or case studies from other individuals or teams that have successfully implemented similar solutions.
Hi, Sanya.
Amiables want to feel that your proposal aligns with their values and will lead to positive outcomes for everyone involved. They respond best to kindness, trust, and a sense of community. The expressive personality. The power of emotion and vision. Expressive personalities are charismatic, energetic, and driven by big ideas. They tend to focus on the bigger picture and are often more emotionally motivated than logically driven. To persuade an expressive person, you need to appeal to their emotions, inspire them with a compelling vision, and show them how your proposal aligns with their personal values and goals. How to communicate with an expressive person. 1. Appeal to their emotions. Expressive are motivated by passion and vision. When making your pitch, emphasize the emotional benefits of your proposal and paint a vivid picture of how it will help them achieve their larger goals. For example, this solution will allow you to finally bring your vision to life, creating an impact that will resonate with everyone in your community. 2. Create a compelling story. Expressives connect deeply with stories, so use narrative techniques to present your solution. Share success stories, testimonials, or personal anecdotes that illustrate the positive impact your idea can have. 3. Be enthusiastic and energetic. Expressives are attracted to energy and enthusiasm. When you present your idea, let your excitement show. Your passion will be contagious and will help them connect emotionally with your vision. For expressives, it's all about the emotional connection and the possibility of making a big impact. Adapting your approach in real time. While knowing these personality types is invaluable, the real skill of persuasion comes from being able to read people in real time and adjust your approach accordingly. People are dynamic, and their needs, fears, and motivations may change throughout the conversation. How to read, cues, and adjust. Mucker, watch body language. Subtle shifts in body language can indicate a person's level of comfort, engagement, or resistance. If they lean in, nod, and maintain eye contact, they're likely receptive. If they cross their arms, avoid eye contact, or seem distracted, they may need more reassurance or a different approach. Listen to their tone of voice. The tone and pace of someone's speech can tell you a lot about their personality. A fast-paced, assertive tone may indicate a driver, while a softer, more relational tone may suggest an amiable personality. Adjust your language. If someone starts to seem overwhelmed with details, shift to a more high-level, vision-oriented approach. If they appear emotionally engaged, dive deeper into the emotional benefits of your proposal. Mastering this level of adaptability allows you to build stronger connections, guide conversations more effectively, and create a more persuasive message for each individual. Persuasion isn't one size fits all. By recognizing and adapting to different personality types, you increase your chances of connecting with people and guiding them toward agreement. As you move forward, remember that persuasion is an art, not a science. Your ability to adjust your approach, read the room, and create a personalized experience for each person will elevate your influence to new heights. In the next chapter, we'll explore how to strengthen your emotional intelligence to better understand and connect with people on a deeper level, ensuring your persuasive efforts are always in tune with the needs of others. Stay with me. You're on your way to becoming a true persuasion master. Chapter 8: Emotional Intelligence, the Secret to Deep, Lasting Influence. Imagine a scenario where, despite your best logical arguments and strategic persuasion techniques, you still can't get the response you're hoping for. The person you're trying to influence isn't convinced. They might seem distracted, indifferent, or even resistant. What's missing? The missing ingredient in this scenario isn't more data, a sharper pitch, or a flashier presentation. What's missing is emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence, EQ, is the ability to perceive, understand, manage, and influence emotions in both yourself and others. It's a critical component of persuasion because emotions drive decision-making far more than logic. No matter how persuasive your arguments are on paper, if you can't connect emotionally with your audience, they may never be fully convinced to take action. In this chapter, we're going to explore why emotional intelligence is the key to persuasion that goes beyond words. You'll learn how to hone your EQ to foster deeper connections, build trust quickly, and influence others in a way that feels natural, authentic, and effective. With the right emotional intelligence skills, you can unlock a whole new level of influence and connect with people on a far more profound level. The 5 components of emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence isn't just about feeling your feelings or being nice. It's a multifaceted skill that can be developed and refined. Psychologist Daniel Goleman, one of the foremost experts on emotional intelligence, identified 5 core components that form the foundation of EQ. 1. Self-awareness. Self-awareness is the ability to recognize and understand your own emotions and how they affect your thoughts, behaviors, and decision-making. When you're self-aware, you're more likely to remain calm and
Hi,
grounded
Sissy.
in high-stakes situations and less likely to react impulsively or defensively. In the context of persuasion, self-awareness helps you recognize when your emotions may be clouding your judgment or influencing your approach to others. Are you feeling frustrated because someone's not responding to your pitch? Are you trying to convince someone because you're desperate for approval? Being aware of these emotions allows you to adjust your approach before it negatively impacts the conversation. Example: if you're presenting a proposal and notice that you're becoming anxious or frustrated because the other person isn't responding as you hoped, acknowledging that emotion allows you to take a step back, refocus, and approach the situation with more patience and clarity. 2. Self-regulation. Self-regulation is the ability to control or redirect disruptive emotions and impulses. It's about staying in control, even when the conversation doesn't go the way you expected. Self-regulation allows you to maintain composure, avoid emotional outbursts, and stay objective in your decision-making. In persuasion, this is especially important when you face resistance or pushback. People will often try to challenge your ideas or question your credibility. If you lose your temper or react defensively, you risk damaging the relationship and losing influence. Instead, by practicing self-regulation, you can respond calmly and thoughtfully, keeping the focus on solving the problem rather than reacting to the emotion of the moment. Example: let's say someone challenges your proposal by raising doubts about your product. Instead of getting defensive or dismissive, self-regulation allows you to calmly acknowledge their concern and offer a well-thought-out response. I understand why you might feel that way. Let me share more data on how this has worked for others in similar situations. Motivation. Motivation refers to your ability to stay focused on goals, even in the face of setbacks or obstacles. It's the drive to achieve, not just for external rewards, but for the satisfaction of doing something meaningful. When you're motivated, you're more likely to persist, even when things aren't going your way. In the context of persuasion, motivation ensures that you don't give up too soon. You'll be more likely to find creative solutions when you encounter resistance, and you'll remain dedicated to your goal without resorting to high-pressure tactics. People are more likely to trust and follow someone who is genuinely motivated by a desire to help and serve, rather than someone who is motivated purely by self-interest. Example: if you're negotiating a deal and hit an impasse, your motivation will keep you focused on finding a win-win solution. Instead of giving up or resorting to manipulation, you'll stay engaged and try to work through the problem with creativity and persistence. 4. Empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. It goes beyond sympathy, feeling pity for someone, and taps into the emotional experience of the person you're interacting with. When you can empathize with someone, you can better understand their fears, desires, and motivations, allowing you to tailor your message to resonate with their emotional state. In persuasion, empathy is a game changer because it allows you to connect on a deeper level. It helps you read between the lines, hear unspoken concerns, and navigate sensitive conversations with care. Empathetic communication helps you avoid misunderstandings and strengthens relationships. Example: imagine you're persuading a colleague to take on a new project. If you sense that they're feeling overwhelmed, you can empathize with their situation. I understand that you've got a lot on your plate right now. If it helps, we can break this down into manageable steps, and I'll support you through the process. 5. Social skills. Social skills involve the ability to manage relationships and build networks. People with high social skills are able to influence, inspire, and navigate social complexities effectively. They excel in communication, conflict resolution, and collaboration, and they can read social cues to build rapport and trust. In persuasion, social skills are essential for creating an environment where others feel comfortable and confident. They allow you to adjust your message based on the individual and build a connection that feels genuine and supportive. Whether you're persuading one person or an entire group, social skills help you navigate the conversation with ease, making others feel heard, understood, and valued. Example: if you're in a team meeting and sense that tension is building between two members, your social skills allow you to step in and mediate, ensuring that the conversation remains productive and focused on collaboration rather than turning into a confrontation. How to develop and strengthen your emotional intelligence. Now that we've covered the 5 components of emotional intelligence, let's talk about how to develop and strengthen these skills. Emotional intelligence is not something you're born with. It's something you can learn and cultivate over time with deliberate practice. 1. Practice self-awareness. Start by regularly reflecting on your emotions and how they impact your interactions. Journaling can be a powerful tool for this. At the end of each day, take a few minutes to write about the emotions you experienced during important conversations or interactions. Were you calm and confident? Or did you feel anxious or defensive? What triggered these emotions and how did they influence your behavior? Over time, you'll begin to notice patterns in your emotional responses, and you'll be able to catch yourself before emotions cloud your judgment. 2. Develop self-regulation techniques. Self-regulation is all about finding ways to stay calm and composed in stressful situations. One effective technique is mindfulness. Taking a few deep breaths and grounding yourself in the present moment before reacting to a stressful situation. When you feel yourself becoming overwhelmed or defensive, pause for a moment, take a deep breath, and assess the situation objectively.
Hi,
3.
Magdalena.
Cultivate empathy. Empathy is a skill that can be developed through active listening and practicing perspective taking. When you're in a conversation, try to put yourself in the other person's shoes. What are they feeling? What do they need? Ask open-ended questions that encourage them to share their thoughts and feelings, and listen attentively without interrupting. 4th, build social skills. Social skills can be honed through practice. Take every opportunity to engage in conversations, network, and collaborate with others. The more you interact with different types of people, the better you'll become at reading social cues and adjusting your approach to fit the situation. Focus on building rapport and finding common ground with others to create a positive and supportive environment. Emotional intelligence is the backbone of persuasive communication. When you can connect with people on an emotional level, build rapport, and understand their motivations, you become an incredibly influential force. Developing your EQ isn't just about influencing others. It's about fostering deeper, more meaningful relationships that last. In the next chapter, we'll explore how to use storytelling as a tool for persuasion, tapping into the emotional power of narrative to move others to action. Stay tuned as we continue to explore the advanced strategies that will take your persuasive abilities to the next level. Chapter 9: Storytelling, the persuasion tool that creates lasting impact. When you think about some of the most persuasive people throughout history, what stands out about them? Was it their credentials? The facts they presented? Or maybe it was the way they told their story? The truth is, storytelling is one of the most powerful tools in persuasion. The reason is simple. Humans are wired for stories. Our brains process stories more effectively than raw data or isolated facts. Stories stir our emotions, engage our imagination, and are easier to remember than abstract concepts. In this chapter, we'll explore why storytelling is such a potent persuasion tool, how to craft a compelling narrative that resonates with your audience, and how to incorporate storytelling into your persuasion techniques. By mastering storytelling, you'll not only persuade others, but leave a lasting impression that will endure long after the conversation ends. Why storytelling works: the neuroscience of persuasion. Before we dive into the mechanics of storytelling, it's important to understand why stories are so effective at persuading people. Research in neuroscience shows that when we hear a story, our brains light up in ways that make us feel like we're actually experiencing the events ourselves. Our empathy system kicks into gear, and we become emotionally invested in the characters and plot. This is the magic of storytelling. It creates an emotional connection between you and your audience. Moreover, storytelling taps into both our logical and emotional sides. While the plot and structure can appeal to the logical mind, it's the emotions evoked by the story that truly drive decision-making. For example, consider how we often remember movies or books, not just for their plot, but for the feelings they left us with. Those feelings influence our thoughts and behaviors, often in ways that are difficult to explain. This is exactly what happens in persuasion. The emotional impact of a well-crafted story often leads to action, even if the person can't fully articulate why they're persuaded. When you craft and deliver a story effectively, you invite your audience into your world. You allow them to see your point of view, feel the emotions you felt, and experience the journey alongside you. And once they're emotionally engaged, they're far more likely to be influenced by your message. The key elements of a persuasive story. Not all stories are created equal. In fact, while any story has the potential to persuade, only the right kind of story will effectively move someone to action. A persuasive story has several key components that make it compelling, engaging, and ultimately persuasive. 1. A relatable protagonist. At the heart of every good story is a character that your audience can relate to. In persuasive storytelling, this character is often you, or someone who embodies qualities that resonate with your audience. The protagonist should face challenges or
Hi, Winnie.
obstacles that are relevant to the listener, ones that they can empathize with or see themselves overcoming. For example, if you're selling a product that helps people save time, your story might feature a busy professional who struggles to balance work and family life. When your audience sees that character's struggles, they naturally empathize and become more open to hearing about how your product can provide a solution. 2. A clear conflict or challenge conflict is the driving force of any compelling story. Without a challenge or conflict, the narrative falls flat. In the case of persuasion, the conflict is often the problem your audience is facing or a pain point they want to overcome. This conflict could be personal, professional, or emotional, but it should feel urgent and significant to your audience. For instance, if you're trying to persuade someone to change their habits, you might describe the internal or external conflicts they are experiencing due to their current way of thinking or living. The greater the challenge, the stronger the emotional response will be when your protagonist finds a solution. 3. A transformation or resolution. In a persuasive story, the protagonist should experience a transformation, either through overcoming their challenges or discovering a new path forward. This resolution is crucial because it offers hope and a tangible solution for your audience. The transformation shows that change is possible and demonstrates that your product, idea, or approach is the key to achieving the desired outcome. For example, if your persuasive story involves a business solution, the transformation might be a company that went from struggling with inefficiency to achieving record profits by implementing your strategy. This transformation should feel attainable to your audience, allowing them to see how the same change can happen for them. 4. Emotional resonance. A persuasive story must evoke emotion. Without an emotional connection, a story is just information. People don't make decisions based solely on logic. They make decisions based on how they feel. Therefore, your story must include emotional highs and lows to draw the listener in. Whether it's empathy, hope, excitement, or even fear, emotions are what drive people to take action. Consider how a well-told story can stir emotions. Perhaps it's a personal struggle the protagonist endures, or a moment of triumph that resonates deeply. The emotions tied to the resolution are often the tipping point that pushes people to make decisions they might have otherwise delayed or avoided. 5. A clear call to action. Every good persuasive story needs a clear call to action, CTA. After your audience has experienced the emotional journey of the story, you need to tell them what to do next. This is the part of the story where you show them how they can achieve the same transformation as the protagonist. Whether it's buying a product, signing up for a service, or adopting a new mindset, your CTA should feel like the natural next step in the story. For example, after telling a story about someone who achieved success with your approach, the CTA could be something like, "Now that you see how this solution works, it's time to take the first step. Here's how you can get started today." Crafting your persuasive story. Now that we've covered the key elements of a persuasive story, let's discuss how to craft one that will resonate with your audience. The process of crafting a persuasive story involves several stages. Each stage requires thoughtful consideration and the ability to tailor the narrative to your specific audience. 1. Know your audience. Before you begin crafting your story, it's important to understand who your audience is. What are their pain points, desires, and goals? What challenges are they facing? The more you know about your audience, the better you can craft a story that speaks directly to their needs. 2. Define the core message. Every story should have a central message or theme. What are you trying to persuade your audience to believe or do? What is the primary takeaway you want them to leave with? Once you define this core message, everything in the story should revolve around it. The protagonist, the conflict, and the resolution all need to serve the purpose of reinforcing this central idea. 3. Create the structure. A persuasive story follows a classic narrative arc. Introduction. Introduce the protagonist, their world, and the conflict. Rising action. Show the struggles the protagonist faces as they attempt to resolve the conflict. Climax. The turning point where the protagonist discovers the solution or transformation. Falling action. The resolution where the protagonist experiences the positive change. Conclusion. Reinforce the call to action and emphasize the takeaway message. 4. Weave in emotion.
There is a
Is
storm.
what makes a story memorable.
Ah!
So it's essential to weave
Oh my God.
emotional highs and lows throughout your narrative. Whether it's
Yo,
the
that tree
frustration
wants
of
to
the
break.
protagonist facing obstacles or the joy of discovering the solution, make sure the emotions are authentic and resonate with your audience's experiences. 5. End with action. After you've told your story, make sure the audience knows what they should do next. The call to action should feel like the natural next step in the story. By this point, your audience will have emotionally invested in the journey, and they'll be more likely to follow through on your suggestion. Using storytelling in persuasive communication. Once you've crafted your persuasive story, it's time to use it strategically in your communication. Here are a few tips for integrating storytelling into your persuasion efforts. 1. Tailor your story to the situation. Every conversation or presentation is unique, so adapt your story to fit the context. Whether you're talking to a potential client, persuading a colleague, or motivating a team, choose a story that aligns with the needs and interests of your audience. 2. Use storytelling in presentations and pitches. Stories are a great way to break the ice, establish rapport, and make your presentation memorable. Whether you're introducing yourself, explaining your product, or making a case for a proposal, storytelling can help illustrate your points in a relatable and engaging way. 3. Practice your delivery. A story is only as powerful as the way it's told. Practice your delivery to ensure that you convey emotion, build suspense, and highlight the key moments of the story. A well-told story can captivate your audience and create a lasting impression. Storytelling is a potent tool in your persuasive toolkit, allowing you to connect with others on a deep, emotional level. When you craft a story that resonates with your audience's experiences and desires, you create an environment where persuasion feels natural and effortless. By mastering storytelling, you're not just persuading people to take action. You're leaving them with a lasting impression that will influence their decisions long after your conversation ends. In the final chapter, we'll tie everything together and explore how to build lasting influence by mastering the art of persuasion in everyday life. With all the tools and strategies you've learned, you'll be ready to become a true master of persuasion. Stay with me. You're almost there. Chapter 10: Becoming a Persuasion Master. Mastering Influence for Lasting Success. In the final chapter of this audiobook, we're diving into something that every true master of persuasion understands. Persuasion is not just about getting what you want in the moment. It's about creating lasting influence, the kind of influence that doesn't fade away once the conversation is over, the kind that stays with the person you've persuaded, shaping their thoughts and actions long after you've walked away. True persuasion is about building trust, relationships, and a reputation for being someone who has the ability to move people in a meaningful, positive way. When you master the art of persuasion, you're not just influencing others, you're shaping the very foundation of your interactions and establishing yourself as a trusted advisor. Persuasion becomes a part of who you are, and your influence becomes a key factor in your success, not just in one area of life, but in every area. Whether you're in sales, leadership, or simply navigating day-to-day relationships, the skills you've gained throughout this audiobook will be invaluable. But before we wrap up, let's focus on how you can apply these principles consistently to achieve lasting success. Building trust, the cornerstone of influence. One of the most important and often overlooked aspects of persuasion is trust. Without trust, you'll never be able to persuade someone effectively. Building trust isn't something that happens overnight. It's a gradual process that requires consistent, genuine effort. Trust forms the foundation for influence because people are more likely to listen to, follow, and believe those they trust. Without trust, even the most well-crafted arguments and sophisticated techniques will fall flat. To build trust, You need to focus on authenticity and reliability. When people feel that you genuinely care about them and their needs, and that you're consistent in your actions, they begin to trust you. Trust is cultivated over time through small gestures, keeping your promises, being transparent, and demonstrating integrity. Example: let's say you're working with a team and there's a new project coming up. If you've consistently shown that you're dependable, honest, and fair, your colleagues will trust your leadership and guidance on the project. They'll be more inclined to listen to your suggestions and buy into your ideas. This trust can make a huge difference when it comes time to persuade them to adopt your approach. Creating a win-win dynamic, the foundation for mutual benefit. True persuasion isn't about forcing others to comply with your will. It's about creating a win-win dynamic, a situation where both parties feel like they've gained something of value. Persuasion works best when it's grounded in mutual benefit. The more you can align your goals with the goals of the other person, the more likely they are to say yes to your proposal. A win-win dynamic requires empathy, understanding, and a genuine interest in helping others. When you focus on what's best for the other person, rather than just yourself, you create an environment where they feel valued and respected. This mutual respect fosters an openness to your ideas and creates a sense of cooperation rather than competition. Example: if you're negotiating a deal, instead of pushing for the best terms for yourself, focus on how both parties can benefit. For example, you might offer a solution that addresses the other party's pain points while still meeting your own needs. This approach builds trust and makes it easier to persuade them to agree to your terms. Consistency. The key to becoming an influential figure. Consistency is what solidifies your influence over time. When people see you consistently demonstrating the principles you preach, they begin to believe in your character and judgment. Your influence isn't based solely on the immediate impact of a single conversation, but on the cumulative effect of all your interactions over time. The more consistently you demonstrate integrity, reliability, and respect, the more your influence grows. Consistency is particularly important when it comes to following through on promises. If you say you're going to do something, do it. If you promise to follow up, follow through. These small actions build your reputation as someone who can be counted on, and this is essential for creating lasting influence. Example: imagine you've convinced a colleague to take on a difficult task. If you're consistent in supporting them, offering guidance when needed, and checking in to ensure they feel confident in their approach, you'll not only gain their trust, but also their respect. Over time, they'll be more likely to listen to your input and trust your judgment. Mastering the psychology of influence. To truly master persuasion, you need to understand the psychology behind human decision making. People don't always make decisions based purely on logic. Much of their decision making is influenced by unconscious biases, emotions, and cognitive shortcuts. As a persuasion master, you need to understand these psychological factors and use them to your advantage. For example, one key psychological principle is reciprocity, the idea that when you give something of value to someone, they feel compelled to return the favor. This principle can be incredibly powerful when building influence. By offering something helpful, whether it's advice, a small favor, or a resource, you trigger a sense of obligation in the other person to reciprocate. This can lead to more favorable outcomes in your interactions. Another principle is social proof, which is the idea that people are more likely to do something if they see others doing it. If you can show that others have already taken the actions you're suggesting, it makes your proposal more persuasive. Social proof is why testimonials, case studies, and success stories are so effective in influencing others. Example: if you're trying to persuade a potential client to purchase your service, you might share a case study of how a similar client benefited from your product. This taps into the principle of social proof, making it easier for your client to trust that your solution is effective. Applying persuasion to everyday interactions. Mastering persuasion doesn't mean you have to be constantly on or using high-level strategies in every conversation. In fact, the most effective persuasion happens in everyday interactions. Whether you're having a casual chat with a colleague, giving feedback to a friend, or asking for a favor from a family member, you can apply the principles of persuasion to create positive outcomes. Start small. Use active listening to understand the needs and desires of others, then craft your message to address those points. If you're asking someone to do something, make sure they feel heard and valued. By focusing on building relationships and aligning your goals with those of others, you naturally increase your persuasive power in day-to-day interactions. Example: if you're trying to persuade your partner to try a new hobby, start by actively listening to their interests. Instead of simply saying, "You should try this," frame it as, "I know you've always enjoyed activities that get you out of the house, and I think this would be something fun we could try together." By showing empathy and making it a shared experience, you're more likely to get a positive response. Continuous improvement, growing your persuasion skills. Becoming a master of persuasion doesn't happen overnight. It's an ongoing process of learning, practicing, and refining your skills. As with any other discipline, the more you practice persuasion, the better you'll become at it. It's also important to remain open to feedback and continuously reflect on your interactions. One way to accelerate your growth is to observe other skilled persuaders. Watch how they communicate, how they influence others, and how they navigate different situations. By studying the techniques of those who excel at persuasion, you'll gain insights into strategies you can incorporate into your own approach. Additionally, take time to reflect on your own interactions. What went well? What could you improve? Regular self-assessment is key to ongoing growth. By now, you've learned the essential strategies and techniques needed to become a true master of persuasion. From understanding emotional intelligence and storytelling, to building trust and applying psychological principles, you have the tools necessary to influence others and get what you want, all while fostering genuine relationships. But remember, the true power of persuasion comes not from using these techniques to manipulate or coerce others, but from the ability to understand their needs, align your goals with theirs, and create positive, lasting outcomes for everyone involved. Now it's time to put these principles into action. Whether you're negotiating a business deal, inspiring your team, or simply having a conversation, use the techniques you've learned to communicate with clarity, confidence, and empathy. With practice and consistency, you'll not only become a persuasion expert, you'll become someone others trust, respect, and look to for guidance. As you step forward with these newfound skills, know that you have the ability to influence, persuade, and create meaningful change in your life and the lives of others. The world of persuasion is at your fingertips. Take action, keep learning, and become the master of influence you were always meant to be.
I want you outside and people asking you, wow, what do you do to glow that way? In 30 days, you're going to be a brand new person. The face is going to be slimmer. Your hair.
It feels like self-help books are going through a bit of a boom at the moment, and I have read a surprising amount of them. Like anyone, I go through difficult periods, and at one point I thought that these books might contain the answers that I sought. Some of them were genuinely helpful, and although I don't revisit them that often now, a few hold a special place in my heart. However, one particular idea just kept cropping up. Many of these books would reference a nebulous idea of living authentically. They seemed to treat the human being as composed of two parts. There is the outer shell, a superficial layer that keeps us all unhappy, but underneath that, there is a golden core. And if we could just discover this core, then we would finally find peace and also somehow achieve extreme worldly success. I've seen this concept become even more influential over the last few years, and it does often crop up on social media, where various influencers will teach you how to become your true self, often for a handy fee. This whole idea struck me as quite suspect, and so this video is something of a polemic. I want to drag what I think is a crude and potentially destructive concept out into the sun in order to examine how it has become so unhelpful and how we might be able to rescue it. Also, I want to give a huge shout out to the book Authenticity as an Ethical Ideal by Somogi Varga, as it was immensely helpful when writing this video and has fundamentally shaped my own ideas about authenticity in countless ways. I won't be able to go too far into the specifics of his ideas here, but I do highly encourage you to give him a read for yourself. But what do these self-help authors tend to mean when they say authentic? And how does this differ from how the concept has been used elsewhere? My name is Joe Foley, and this is Unsolicited Advice. But if you want to avoid fakery on your newsfeed, then I recommend you check out today's very kind sponsor, Ground News. Ground News is a website and app that gathers related articles from thousands of sources around the world in one place so you can compare how different outlets cover the same story. Every story comes with a clear breakdown of the political bias, factuality, ownership, and headlines of the reporting sources, with ratings backed by independent news monitoring organizations. Ground News are very kindly offering anyone who uses my link or scans my QR code 40% off their Vantage plan as a special deal, so I highly encourage you to snap this up. For instance, let's see how left and right-wing publications differed on the recent fallout from the US tariff increases. While right-wing sources were more enthusiastic, directly quoting the reasoning behind the tariffs, left-wing sources were much less optimistic, suggesting that the response from China will have a severe negative impact on US agriculture. I especially like the blind spots feed, which highlights stories that are disproportionately covered by the left or the right. This feed helps readers step into the other side's news reality and understand the different narratives that can shape our beliefs, such as left-wing news stories missing Honda moving some of their production to Indiana from Mexico, or right-wing sources not covering the possible cost to American consumers of the new tariffs. I just don't have a lot of time to keep up with the news, and certainly not to examine every article I read for bias and misinformation. So Ground News is fantastic for giving me an idea of the differences in reporting on different stories, so that I can get a variety of views rather than remaining stuck in my echo chamber. Ground News is giving my viewers 40% off their unlimited access Vantage plan. I think Ground News is doing very important work, and I sincerely hope you'll check them out. But anyway, back to the video. 1. Authenticity. Initial conceptions. Historically, being authentic has meant a variety of different things. Many Christian thinkers, like St. Augustine or Kierkegaard, considered authenticity to be very closely linked to a relationship with God, and that it was found partly within, but also with this connection to a higher power. Someone like Diogenes the Cynic thought that authentic behavior was closely aligned with what he considered natural for humans to do, as well as abiding by a certain set of ethical and ascetic principles. In his book, Varga notes that most modern ideas about authenticity fall into roughly two camps: the inner sense camp and the productionist camp. We'll definitely be visiting the productionists later in the video, but most forms of authenticity in self-help literature and in popular discourse fall into this inner sense camp. Very broadly, inner sense authenticity defines being authentic as being aligned with some deep inner you that you can commune with purely by reflecting on yourself or looking inward, hence inner sense. Varga traces this idea back at least as far as Rousseau, and it is very much in line with how many people use the term today. In Will Storr's book, Selfie, he says the following about the ideal put forward by authenticity-focused self-help culture. The ideal self enjoys thinking it's in some way unique, that it's trying to make the world a better place. And one of the traits it'll value highly is that of personal authenticity, or being real. It'll preach that in order to find happiness and success, you must be true to yourself and follow your dreams. He later expands upon this with ideas from various influential originators of the modern self-help movement. Principally, authenticity is intended to burrow through to each other's perfect core, leading to breakthrough, and transformation. The idea here is pretty simple. A real self is posited that represents the true us. This is what all of our quests for authenticity are aiming at. Crucially, this is not about crafting a self or developing a particular character out of choice. It is about discovery. We find this discovery-based language all through popular culture. It has even become cliché that a young person embarking on a traveling adventure will say that they are going to find themselves. On this picture, the authentic self is meant to already be inside you, just waiting for you to uncover it. As we will see, this is pretty different to the way many philosophers like Heidegger or Sartre tended to talk about authenticity. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. It's also worth noting that this image of authenticity is often not explicitly argued for, but is instead working in the background to a greater or lesser extent. It's more of an underlying assumption than a definite conclusion or a thesis. Another important component to our popular conception of authenticity is that it's an ethical goal to strive for. We are told that being authentic is better than being inauthentic, both in the sense that we will be happier and healthier, but also that it is more honest. To call someone fake or inauthentic is not just telling them that their way of life will not make them fulfilled in the long term. It is to say that they are, in some sense, bad. This does not always stretch as far as calling them evil or anything like that, but it does sow some suspicion on their character. This is, again, very different to how inauthenticity has been portrayed elsewhere. In Leo Tolstoy's classic novella, The Death of Ivan Ilyich, the eponymous lead wastes his entire life just following societal expectations until he realizes that he will die having never asked what he wanted. But Tolstoy doesn't say that Ivan Ilyich is a bad person. He is a tragic figure. We mourn for him. We don't condemn him. Our modern concept of inauthenticity has advanced from being an unfortunate personal blind spot to a downright moral failing. This is pretty noteworthy, and we'll be revisiting it later in the video when we examine the pressures to be authentic in the modern world. As Varga points out, the true self is also often associated with being uncorrupted by interaction with others or with society as a whole. It is sometimes identified with an infant or a child, a singular individual who has not yet taken up any role in constructing or maintaining a social web or a network of relationships. There is this implicit assumption that what is within is the true you, and that this personal truth can be defined separate to any participation in a social system. The true self is broadly seen as unchanging and is thought to reflect a permanent core around which the more ephemeral parts of you are wrapped. And, of course, being aligned with this inner self is supposed to grant you great peace. It is sometimes pitched as a sort of psychological panacea. Getting in touch with the real you is the thing that will finally solve all your problems. By contrast, being out of line with the true self is sure to bring you misery and suffering. I also want to point out that this veneration of authenticity is not based on nothing. It has been repeatedly shown that when people behave authentically, they report higher levels of happiness or well-being. However, things get complicated. because the definitions of authenticity used in many empirical studies is often much more subtle than this inner sense view, and tends to instead refer to the consistency of values with behavior or something like that. This is very different to the idea that we have a true self that we must discover within us. Also, generally, having looked through a lot of empirical research papers for this video, there is some disagreement between the definitions used in each study, which can make it difficult to see exactly what is being studied and to draw conclusions between different studies. Sometimes the congruence of authenticity is between inner feelings and outer behavior. Sometimes it's more values-based, and sometimes a wider idea of self-enhancement is used. This makes it difficult to confidently put forward a single, unified definition for authenticity in empirical psychology. But in almost all cases, the definition is far more complex than just coherence with a true inner self working behind the scenes. For example, Corey Gunther links authenticity to a sense of self-development. That is, self-perceived authenticness is not just a matter of reflecting something within, but improving oneself as well. Overall, it is the simplistic inner sense idea of authenticity that I want to criticize. In short, this is the theory that there's a permanent underlying self behind all of our actions, and that if we align ourselves with this self, it will necessarily have a large part in solving our psychological problems. Moreover, this true self is formed in isolation, is broadly unchanging, and is set apart from social fabrics. And being true to it is a moral imperative and an ethical goal. So, I'm going to start by critiquing the actual tenability of this picture of the human mind, and then move on to disputing its ethical value. And this will involve stepping outside merely Western philosophy and looking at one of the most influential thinkers to have ever lived. 2. The myth of the true self. Of all the beliefs of early Buddhism, there is one that stands out for its philosophical innovation and precise analytic structure. The idea that there is no permanent self, and that it is, at best, a pragmatic falsehood, and at worst, a dangerous illusion. In various different suttas or sutras, the Buddha goes through the different aspects of what we call ourselves and demonstrates how none of them are permanent and so cannot be identified with this single unchanging I or ego. Take our feelings, for example. They are in constant flux, and so they can't be the true permanent us. The same goes for our body, since it too develops and changes. Our perceptions can't be us, nor can our desires be, since they too morph and fade and re-emerge. Lastly, even our base level awareness or consciousness can't be us, since things flit in and out of that awareness all the time. Even if we say that there is some permanent thing that is experiencing the awareness, this is such a minimal notion of the self that we can't really hang anything on it. The Buddha thus argues that searching for a permanent inner self is a lost cause. Something like this simply does not exist. Our perceptions, desires, feelings, and thoughts are no more this permanent inner core than the trees outside or the clouds above. Over 2,000 years later,
The empiricist philosopher David Hume would come up with quite a similar idea called bundle theory. This is the notion that what we call us is not one enduring thing, but an ever-changing mass or bundle of experiences, memories, and perceptions. Varga himself also critiques inner sense views of authenticity, but from a slightly different angle. He does not want to claim that an inner self is incoherent, but he points out that the components of our minds can either be identified with or not identified with based on someone's personal values, and that this seems like an extremely relevant factor if we're going to define an authentic self. An extreme example of this is the phenomenon of intrusive thoughts. When someone has an intrusive thought, it is often rather disturbing, and it's one that they don't explicitly identify with, like the urge to hurl yourself off a ledge or to do someone extreme harm. To use another example, when I'm angry, I might get the urge to hit someone, but I deliberately seize control of that desire and quell it, rejecting it from whatever I call I. There is clearly something that separates what we consider authentically us from the rest of our mental architecture. And it seems like establishing this distinction will involve the endorsement or rejection of certain inner properties based on the agent's values. Put a pin in this idea of values, as we will definitely be coming back to it later. Even by itself, this already complicates the inner sense view that we discussed in the previous section, because whether or not you endorse a particular aspect of your inner world seems to at least partly be a matter of choice. In the case of me wanting to hit someone, I can either choose to identify that urge with me and either say, I will hit this person, or I really ought to hit this person, or I can rein the desire in. There is at least part of myself that I don't discover, but create. This is a very different view of authenticity that Varga calls the productionist account. In its most extreme form, a productionist claims that we don't find ourselves at all, but we create ourselves. In practice, there aren't many total productionists, but some thinkers, at least along productionist lines, are Friedrich Nietzsche and Jean-Paul Sartre. Much of Nietzsche's philosophical project involves crafting your life until it is a work of art and creating your own values in a vital, active way. He did not think that you discovered who you were, but became who you were by acting and creating in the world. He encouraged outright experimentation with the self and the gradual alignment of the different aspects of our wills until they are all pointed broadly in a single direction. Sartre's existential authenticity is perhaps even more explicit. It involves recognizing the radical freedom in your choices, that in any situation you are not technically bound by your social roles or your past or anything else, really. You could choose to act however you want. And it is in the choices that you make that you craft the project of your life. Again, here, authenticity is not finding a self within, but making a self by acting and deciding. For Sartre, how you choose to act in full consciousness of your extreme freedom just is authentically you. He was very skeptical at using an inner sense to detect some kind of true self separate from this, since he thought that the human capacity for self-deception was just incredibly large. To quote him directly, feelings are developed from the actions we take. I shouldn't seek within myself some authentic state that will compel me to act. When most existential philosophers speak of authenticity, they often mean something much closer to this than the popular idea of authenticity that we discussed earlier. In fact, Sartre would condemn that version of authenticity as acting in bad faith. To say that you behave in a certain way because that's just who I am, or to say that you have an inner essence that you are bound to, is effectively denying freedom and responsibility and playing a predefined part. It just so happens that the part you are playing is some strange perception you have of yourself, and that makes it a bit harder to spot. However, I do think there is a danger in a purely productionist model of authenticity as well. For example, as Sartre points out, it seems like we can be deeply wrong about who we are. If the past 100 or so years of psychotherapy and psychology have taught us anything, it's that we can form images of ourselves that simply don't reflect how our minds actually function. I might fool myself into thinking that I'm courageous when I'm actually rather cowardly. Or I might think that I'm considerate of others where I am actually quite selfish. I cannot count the number of self-professed people pleasers that I've met who seem anything but. As I said, Sartre also recognized this, since he devotes an awful lot of his existentialist project to parts of ourselves that are defined through our relationship with other people. In his play, No Exit, he explores the torment that is caused by our need for our
Camille,
self-perception to be agreed upon by our peers. It's very difficult to see yourself as brave or attractive or lovable if these are not affirmed by the people around you that you respect. This suggests that the self cannot purely be produced by us in the same way that I produce this script. It is not just the product of our decisions, but also the social fabric that we are enmeshed in. And thus, it is not just defined by us, but by those around us as well. It's worth noting that this same critique also attacks the pure inner sense idea from the previous section. Far from there being this semi-innate true self that is corrupted by our interactions with other people and with society, some parts of us do seem to be inexorably linked with our cultural and social backdrop. At some level, we are likely already aware of this. While most people don't want to say an explicit social role like their job is their authentic self, we do tend to admit that even at our deepest levels, we are still somewhat shaped by our environment, and that includes our social and cultural context. But whether you hold the extreme view that there just is no real inner self, or some variant of the productionist framework, or just accept the influence of our social environment, this all throws significant doubt onto the standard picture of authenticity that we use in popular discourse, where there is a neat division between an unchanging inner core and one's outer behavior or social interactions, with any discrepancy between the two immediately being labeled as harmful inauthenticity. But beyond these questions about the coherence of our popular view of authenticity, we can also evaluate it from an ethical and a practical perspective, because when it's pushed to its extreme, it can encourage a borderline narcissistic view of reality, where the whole world must bow down to your true inner self, no matter the cost. If you want to help me make more videos like this, then please consider becoming one of my wonderful patrons for access to occasional exclusive content, including, most recently, my full interview with Alex O'Connor. 3. The idolized self. Along with the idea that the self is something purely internal, comes this further moral division between
Hi.
our true selves and the outside world. The
I can see
world
that.
and
I see
society
your
more
legs. Thank
generally
you so much.
are seen as inherently oppositional forces to who
Oh, well, I'm
we
going.
are,
I think I'm going to
making
stop
the
here.
true self inside us good and anything that threatens it bad. Again, there is a nugget
Oh my
of
goodness.
truth to this idea. It is true that in a lot of social environments, many of us have to stifle our internal feelings, thoughts, and values to fit in with a wider group. The term emotional labor was coined by Arlie Hochschild to describe how service workers have to hide how they are truly feeling and put on a smile in order to please their customers, and how this can be exhausting and alienating over time. There is something about having to consciously hide a mental state that is genuinely unpleasant. Likewise, modern psychological theories of cognitive dissonance point out that it is painful to have your behavior, feelings, and values caught up in webs of contradictions. Nonetheless, the simplified picture of authenticity that has come to dominate
wanting to
public
create
discourse
this
on the topic can have downright dangerous consequences here. It is clear that being internally out of sync can be uncomfortable, but a dogged pursuit of this crude sense of authenticity can be just as destructive. Firstly, the behavioral consequences of acting authentically are going to vary wildly depending on which part of the psyche is most closely identified with this true self. As already discussed, a lot of empirical work in this area is about someone acting in accordance with their values, which is a fundamentally ethical concept and